Imagine a dormant, fiery power, coiled tightly at the very base of your spine. Suddenly, struck by this intense internal heat, it awakens with a fierce hissing sound. This primordial serpent power pierces your central spinal channel, shooting upward like a bolt of lightning, illuminating every center of your being until it shatters the illusion of limitation and unlocks the ultimate state of cosmic consciousness. Welcome to the Last Guru podcast, the podcast for all those curious and passionate about spirituality, which explores human potential from an evolutionary perspective, but also helps address life's practical problems at a higher level of knowledge.
Thank you. It's great to be here for this one.
Yeah, today our mission in this deep dive is to explore the absolute ultimate path of awakening. We're really unpacking the precise, objective spiritual science of unlocking your highest human potential.
Right, through some highly specific physical and energetic practices.
Exactly. We're going to look closely at how you actually prepare the physical body and the mind to harness, well, basically the most powerful force in the universe. But before we can talk about awakening your ultimate potential, we need to deeply understand what exactly is sleeping inside you.
Yeah, and it starts with a really profound premise. The idea that your human body is a perfect microcosm of the entire universe.
Right.
That is the foundational truth you have to grasp if you want to walk this path. Whatever exists in the external cosmic universe, it exists in exact proportion within you. Deep within your physical structure, there's this primordial static energy resting at the base of your spine.
And that's located at the root support, right? The Muladhara center.
Exactly. This energy is Kundalini. It rests there in the form of a sleeping serpent wound into 3.5 coils.
Why specifically 3.5?
Well, those 3.5 coils represent the fundamental forces of nature. They symbolize the 3 primary qualities of existence, and that half coil represents the underlying unmanifested potential for all creation. Kundalini is the supreme static power.
The residual energy of creation itself.
Right, exactly. And to understand how your body functions as a microcosm, you really have to recognize the distinct difference between this static energy and your dynamic energy.
Okay, so what is the dynamic energy?
Your dynamic energy is prana. Prana is the working force of the body. I mean, it's your breath, your blood circulation, cellular digestion, the actual movement of life that keeps your physical form going.
So prana is constantly in motion.
Yes. But beneath every single activity, there has to be a static base. Kundalini is that static, infinite reservoir of cosmic power that quietly supports all those dynamic forces operating within you.
You know, as you described that static center and the massive field of dynamic energy moving around it, my mind immediately goes to the structure of an atom as we understand it in modern physics.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
Right, because if you look at an atom, it is entirely a miniature universe. At the very center, you have a static positive charge that remains completely at rest. And orbiting around that quiet center is this massive chaotic cloud of dynamic negative charges, the electrons, constantly in high-speed motion. The entire structural integrity of that atom relies on the perfect balance between the static core and the dynamic orbit.
Yes, absolutely.
Is this atomic structure what the human body is doing, just on a larger scale?
The human body is doing exactly that. It's the ultimate polarized magnet, designed with the precise geometry of both the atom and the solar system.
Wow.
The base of your spine, where Kundalini rests, serves as the static positive pole of your whole physiological and energetic existence. The dynamic forces of your body, your breathing, cellular activity, the electricity firing through your nervous system.
Those are the negative orbiting charges?
Precisely. They're the kinetic energy swirling around your dormant cosmic core. And what's crucial to realize is that ordinary human consciousness is entirely maintained by this exact equilibrium.
Meaning, as long as Kundalini sleeps at the base of your spine, you remain awake only to the mundane physical world.
Right. You perceive yourself as an isolated individual, just operating in a world of separate objects. The entire practice of this spiritual science is designed to deliberately and systematically disturb this physiological equilibrium.
So by arousing the static core, the energy is forced to become fully dynamic.
Exactly. When that static core rises and merges with the highest center of consciousness in the brain, the polarity collapses entirely. The 2 poles unite into one, the illusion of separation vanishes, and the result is absolute superconscious realization.
Okay, but that brings up a really fascinating practical problem. I mean, if we are literally walking around with a dormant cosmic power source at the base of our spine, we can't just carelessly flip the switch?
No, definitely not.
You can't run high voltage through a fragile wire without melting the wire. That's a fundamental law of physics, and it seems to be a fundamental law of this spiritual science, too.
It absolutely is.
So before anyone attempts to wake this sleeping serpent, the physical and mental vessel has to be strictly, rigorously purified. How do we actually build a vessel strong enough to hold that kind of high voltage energy?
Well, you build it through an uncompromising foundation of physical and internal purity. To safely handle cosmic energy, your nervous system and your internal channels have to be flawless.
Right. So where does that preparation actually start?
It begins with the 6 acts of purification, known as the Shat Karma. These acts cleanse the body of really dense blockages. And one of the most profound of these acts is Tritaka.
Kritaka. Okay, what does that involve?
It involves gazing fixedly at a single minute point without ever blinking until tears literally flow from the eyes.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's not just some exercise in willpower. It's a precise mechanical technique to halt the erratic movements of the mind and develop intense, laser-like focus.
I want to pause on Tritaka for a second because staring at a single point without blinking sounds simple, but I want to understand the mechanics behind it. How does keeping your eyes completely still physically stop your thoughts? What is the actual link there?
The link is the direct neurological pathway between your optic nerves and your brain's cognitive processing.
Okay.
Under normal conditions, your eyes are constantly making these micro movements, scanning the environment for threats or stimuli. Every single movement of the eye sends a signal to the brain, which triggers a cascading fluctuation of thoughts.
So your mental chatter is basically tethered to your visual instability.
Exactly. By forcing the eyes to remain absolutely motionless on a single point, you deprive the brain of new visual input. The sensory feedback loop is completely broken.
Ah, I see.
When the eyes become perfectly still, the mind loses its anchor to the external world and is forced into a state of profound singular stillness.
That makes perfect sense. You're essentially cutting the fuel line to the distracted mind. But mental purification is only half the battle, right? Because I know this science also places a massive emphasis on the yogic diet, mitahara.
Yes, diet is critical.
And the rules here are incredibly strict. You're supposed to fill exactly half your stomach with sweet, nutritious food. You fill 1/4 with pure water, and then you must leave the final quarter of your stomach completely empty.
That's correct.
Why is that empty space so critical?
That empty space is an architectural necessity for the movement of internal energy.
Yeah.
Your body is filled with vital winds, these internal airs that have to circulate freely.
Right.
If you pack the stomach completely full of heavy food, you physically compress the space required for these subtle energetic currents to move. A heavy, overfilled stomach creates a dense, tamasic state. Yeah. Tamas is the quality of lethargy, darkness, and inertia. It generates physical impurities and sluggishness within the subtle nerve channels, the nadis. You have to leave that 25% empty so the internal winds have the physical room to circulate, heat up, and eventually be directed toward the dormant Kundalini.
I have to express some doubt here, though, because leaving 1/4 of your stomach empty sounds incredibly difficult for anyone living in the modern world. We are totally conditioned to eat until we're completely full.
Oh, absolutely. It goes against modern habits completely.
And a lot of people today just, download a meditation app, sit on their couch, and jump straight into advanced mental practices, completely bypassing this strict dietary and physical discipline.
Which is very dangerous.
Right. So what is the actual physical risk if someone ignores this foundation and tries to force this energy awake?
The risks are severe, and they are entirely physical. If your physical wiring is impure, if your nervous system is weak, or if your digestive tract is burdened by excess food and toxic elements, the energy cannot flow through its natural central channel.
It gets blocked.
Exactly. If you attempt to force Kundalini awake while your channels are blocked by dietary negligence, the energy will violently misdirect. Instead of ascending smoothly through the central spinal axis, it will scatter outwards into your peripheral nervous system.
Wow, that sounds awful.
It causes extreme physiological distress. Attempting these advanced practices without a purified diet and a fortified nervous system invites disease, uncontrollable nervous tension, and complete physical breakdown.
So the vessel will literally fracture under the pressure of cosmic power.
Yes, exactly.
Which perfectly explains why the physical posture, the asana, is so mandatory. You can't hold this energy if you're slouching.
No, you definitely can't.
Postures like Padmasana, the full lotus pose, or Vajrasana, the adamantine pose, they're clearly not just about displaying physical flexibility.
Not at all. They are engineered to lock the hips and lower body into a highly stable geometry. They keep the spinal column perfectly straight, ensuring that the central channel is entirely unobstructed.
Okay, so if we've built this vessel, if it's fortified through posture and purified through diet, it's still just an empty container. It requires fuel and ignition.
Right, and this is where the science of pranayama, the control of the breath, enters the picture.
So by controlling the gross physical breath moving in and out of your lungs, you somehow gain direct mechanical control over the subtle inner energy, the prana.
Exactly. The breath is the bridge between the physical body and the subtle energy system. And the core of pranayama lies in kumbhaka, which is the deliberate retention of the breath.
Okay, how does that work?
Well, there are two primary phases of this. First is saita, where the breath is held intentionally and consciously during the practice. The ultimate goal, however, is kevala kumbhaka.
What's the difference?
Kevala is a state where the breath naturally and effortlessly ceases altogether. Not through force, but because the mind and the internal energy have become perfectly still.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But to reach that absolute stillness, you must first utilize specific breathing techniques to manipulate the body's internal climate. For example, Surya involves breathing exclusively through the right nostril.
To generate heat?
Yes, intense internal heat, and to destroy ailments related to excess wind. Then there's Ujjayi, which involves a slight constriction of the throat. This produces a friction in the breath that purifies the head and massively increases the internal gastric fire.
Fascinating.
Then you have Sitali, which uses the tongue to draw in air, cooling the entire biological system and curing fevers. But the most dramatic, the most forceful, and really the most crucial of these techniques for awakening the serpent power is Pastrika.
You know, listening to you describe Pastrika, it sounds exactly like a blacksmith working a bellows in a forge.
That is the perfect analogy.
A blacksmith violently pumps the bellows to force oxygen into the coals, taking a dull, quiet ember and whipping it into a roaring, white-hot fire. But mechanically, how does rapidly breathing air into the lungs strike a fire all the way down at the base of the spine?
Because Pastrika is a highly engineered physiological mechanism. When you perform this rapid, forceful exhalation and inhalation, you are doing far more than simply hyperventilating.
Right.
You're driving the vital air violently down into the abdominal cavity directly against the base of the spine. Just like the blacksmith's bellows blast air into the furnace, Pastrika blasts the prana down into the internal fire of the body, which is located at the navel center.
So this rhythmic, mechanical striking massively accelerates that internal gastric fire.
Yes. And as this intense, localized heat builds, it is deliberately directed downward. The dormant Kundalini, resting peacefully at the Muladhara center, is suddenly subjected to this overwhelming, blazing heat and the relentless physical pressure of the breath.
It's literally burned and suffocated out of its slumber.
Exactly. Unable to tolerate the intense psychic heat and the friction of the moving internal winds, Kundalini is forced to uncoil. It wakes in a state of extreme agitation, producing that distinct hissing vibration, and stands erect.
And it seeks the only available escape route from the inferno, which is the hollow tube of the central spinal channel.
Right.
So you have now generated a massive roaring internal fire through the breath. But fire naturally spreads and rises?
It does.
If you don't have a highly specific mechanism to contain and direct that high-pressure energy, the fire simply dissipates outward into the body, completely wasted.
Absolutely.
To harness it, you have to use the internal muscular locks and seals, known as bandha and mudra. These are physical contractions that seal the energy inside the body and force it strictly upward into the central channel, the sushumna.
Yes, and some of these, like Mahamudra and Yoni Mudra, are supreme seals designed to block all external sensory inputs.
Right. They force every drop of your consciousness to redirect inward, which is a profound concept when you consider how much of our energy today is constantly drained by external distractions.
Oh, completely. But the real mechanical heavy lifting seems to happen with the three major physical locks.
Right. First is Mula Bandha, the root lock, where you intensely contract the anal sphincter. Then you have Uddiyana Bandha, the abdominal lock, where you hollow out the belly and pull the intestines forcefully back against the spine.
And finally, Jalandhara Bandha, the throat lock, where you press your chin firmly into your chest.
Those three locks are the most critical mechanical operations in this entire science. You must understand how the body's energy normally flows to grasp why these locks are necessary.
Yeah, normally the dynamic energy, prana, naturally moves upward through the respiratory system. Simultaneously, another vital force called apana naturally moves downward, governing elimination and the lower bodily functions.
So they're entirely divergent forces moving in opposite directions.
Exactly. This constant pulling apart is what keeps the body bound to mundane physical existence and prevents the accumulation of ultimate power.
I am picturing an industrial steam engine right now. If you cap the top valve at the throat and you lock the bottom valve at the root and then you compress the middle chamber.
The pressure buildup must be staggering.
Right. What physically happens to the energy when those upward and downward currents physically crash into each other inside the body?
Well, the mechanism is a masterpiece of internal engineering. When you apply Mula Bandha, the root lock, you completely seal the lower escape route. You trap the downward flowing apana and violently force it to reverse direction, driving it upward into the region of the blazing navel fire.
Okay.
Simultaneously, by applying Jalandhara Bandha, the throat lock, you seal the upper escape route. This forces the upward flowing prana downward, directly into that exact same fire.
And then the abdominal lock, Uddiyana Bandha, tightly compresses the physical space where they meet.
Yes, you now have two immense energetic currents colliding at high speed inside a blazing internal furnace. This collision creates an unimaginable energetic supersaturation at the base of the spine. The Muladhara center becomes completely overloaded with pressure.
Wow. And the sleeping Kundalini is already agitated and uncoiled by the heat of the breath at this point.
Exactly. So now it's caught in this extreme pressure chamber. The serpent has no space to move down, no space to expand outward, and is being relentlessly struck by the united, fiery force of prana and apana.
Under this absolute inescapable pressure, Kundalini is violently propelled into the only open pathway.
Right. It enters the central channel, the Sushumna, and begins its radical ascent toward the crown.
So the valves are locked tight, the sensory inputs are completely sealed, and the absolute pressure dictates that the energy has nowhere to go but up.
Yes.
This marks the beginning of the most dramatic and transformative journey possible for a human being. The awakened Kundalini begins its upward ascent through the energetic centers, the chakras. But as this concentrated lightning bolt of energy travels upward, it doesn't encounter a smooth, empty pipe.
No, it doesn't.
It has to violently pierce through three massive, dense, energetic knots, the granthis, which bind human consciousness to the material world. First, it strikes the Brahma Granthi at the navel. Then, it surges higher to hit the Vishnu Granthi at the heart. Finally, it pierces the Rudra Granthi at the space between the eyebrows.
Right.
But what does it actually mean to pierce a knot? These aren't physical knots made of tissue, right?
No, they are not physical tissue, but they are dense psychic complexes that dictate your perception of reality. They represent the deepest attachments of the human ego.
Okay, so when it hits the first one.
When Kundalini strikes the Brahma Granthi at the navel, it is shattering your primal attachment to the physical body and basic material survival. You cease to identify as merely a biological organism.
Incredible.
Then, as the energy forces its way higher and pierces the Vishnu Granthi at the heart, it obliterates your attachments to ego, emotion, and personal love. The localized, selfish emotions are burned away, replaced by an expansive universal resonance.
And the final one at the eyebrows.
Finally, when it pierces the Rudra Granthi at the eyebrows, it destroys the final, subtle illusion of a separate self and individual intellect. As Kundalini burns through each of these centers, it executes a systematic dissolution of the universe within you.
Dissolution. How so?
The dense element of earth within your body dissolves into the fluidity of water. Water vaporizes into the heat of fire. Fire consumes itself and expands into air. Air disperses into the vastness of ether, and ether dissolves completely into the pure, unmanifested mind.
That sounds like a complete and systematic dismantling of reality itself. Earth melting into water, water into fire, all the way back to pure mind.
It truly is.
And this journey ultimately arrives at the Sahasrara, the glorious thousand-petaled lotus located at the crown of the head. It is here that the dynamic, kinetic energy of the universe, Shakti, finally reunites with the supreme static consciousness, Shiva.
Yes.
This reunion is said to create a literal rain of divine, immortal nectar that floods the physical system, sustaining the yogi's body entirely independent of normal biological functions.
It's the ultimate culmination.
But this brings up a huge question for me. A lot of spiritual traditions around the world demand severe asceticism. They tell you that you have to suffer, you have to completely reject the physical world, and you have to punish the flesh to free the spirit.
That's a very common view, yeah.
Right. So why is this specific path of awakening so entirely unique in its claim to offer both mukti, which is the ultimate spiritual liberation, and bhukti, which is the supreme enjoyment of the physical world? Why do you not have to choose between them?
This path offers both mukti and bhukti because it fundamentally rejects the illusion that spirit and matter are enemies. Traditional ascetic paths operate on the assumption that the body is a trap, a dirty cage that must be starved and punished so the pure soul can finally escape.
Right, that the body is just an obstacle.
Exactly. But the objective science of Kundalini understands that the body itself is the direct physical manifestation of the Divine Mother. The body is Shakti. When Kundalini ascends and unites with Shiva in the crown of your head, you achieve mukti.
Absolute liberation.
Yes. You experience absolute liberation from ignorance, complete freedom from the cycle of birth and death, and an immersion in infinite cosmic bliss. Your consciousness expands far beyond the physical cosmos.
Wow.
However, when you return your awareness to the physical plane, your perspective is permanently and radically transmuted. You do not return to a prison. You return to a divine instrument.
Because you've realized that your physical form is the energetic manifestation of the absolute.
Exactly. Every single action you take becomes a cosmic event. Eating, walking, seeing, and breathing are no longer mundane chores performed by an isolated, anxious ego. They are the supreme consciousness enjoying its own creation through the exquisite vehicle of your senses.
That is beautiful.
You enjoy bhukti, supreme enjoyment, because there is no longer any separation between the enjoyer, the act of enjoying, and the object being enjoyed. Everything is recognized as a unified field of divine bliss. Therefore, you don't have to flee to a secluded cave to find the divine. You live vibrantly and fully in the world, wielding supreme power and experiencing absolute joy, perfectly liberated while fully alive.
Yeah. This brings us to a profound, paradigm-shifting realization for anyone listening. Your physical body is not an obstacle to be conquered, tortured, or transcended. It is the most highly advanced, perfectly engineered divine instrument in existence.
It really is.
When you fully, fundamentally grasp this truth, the mundane reality you experience every single day is permanently altered. The simple, daily acts of eating a meal, taking a breath of fresh air, or walking down a busy street are no longer yours alone.
No, they aren't.
They are the actions of the infinite cosmic energy, intimately experiencing the physical world through the unique, beautiful aperture of your existence. You are literally the universe waking up to itself.
We look forward to seeing you at the next episode of The Last Guru, to live with passion, because when the veil falls, trust and surrender reveal that no one is ever alone and never has been.